In 2014, China started building islands. Islands it has quickly filled with missile systems, airfields, roads, radar domes, vehicles, and troops. These man-made islands, located in the South China Sea, are part of the Spratly Islands archipelago and have turned one of the most strategic and resource-rich locations in Southeast Asia into a present-day world superpower property dispute. What were once shallow underwater rocks and reefs are now fully militarized Chinese islands. As can be seen in these images, as early as 2013, massive Chinese dredging ships scooped up sand and rocks from the seafloor and pumped them onto the rocks and reefs, creating 7 entirely new islands over the course of just 2 years. According to the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative research, these 7 artificial islands, Mischief Reef, Quarteron Reef, Fiery Cross Island, Gavin Reef, Johnson Reef, Hughes Reef, and Subi Reef, now cover over 3,200 acres of new land. These islands, whose surrounding waters are rich with resources and are located in highly strategic parts of the South China Sea, can dramatically shift the balance of power in the region. The South China Sea is one of the most important areas of ocean on the entire planet, estimated to contain at least 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 11 billion barrels of oil in proved and probable reserves. It is also home to nearly 10% of the world's fisheries, 30% of the world's shipping traffic, and nearly 50% of the world's global oil tanker shipments. Needless to say, controlling this sea is of great importance to the countries whose borders touch it. And there are numerous countries who currently claim some part of the sea, including China, Vietnam, Philippines, Taiwan, Brunei, and Malaysia. While most of the proven and probable oil and gas reserves lie along the margins of the sea as shown in this diagram, there are vast reserves that lie in the more heavily disputed areas of the sea. And this is where the construction of China's man-made islands in the Spratly Island area is of particular interest. With China's daily oil consumption of nearly 13 million barrels, access to oil reserves is a real concern for a country whose domestic oil production is heavily dwarfed by its demand. In this video, we'll be exploring the reasons behind China's artificial islands in the South China Sea. We'll examine China's claim to them and how these claims are shaping geopolitics in the region. Before we start though, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon for notifications if you like what you see. Now, let's get right into it. On the onset, it's important to remember that the space now occupied by the islands was not previously considered territory under international law. Several Asian countries have justifiable claims in the South China Sea, relying on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, also known as UNCLOS, which states that a country's territory extends 200 miles off of its shores in an area that is called the Exclusive Economic Zone. As can be seen in this image, all marine resources and energy exploration rights that fall within a particular country's EEZ belong to that country. Any area falling outside of an EEZ is considered international waters, and being subject to maritime law is shared by everyone. However, China claims the entire area, some as far as 740 miles from mainland China, as its own, and uses them to bolster this claim to the region. China's claim relies largely on 15th century historical claims to the South China Sea. Following World War II, China attempted to officially reclaim this area as its own by drawing a dashed line formerly known as the 9-dash line on international maps. In 2016, an international arbitration panel concluded in the case, Philippines versus China, that China had no right to claim sovereignty over the islands within the area it had marked with its 9-dash line, and that construction of the islands had breached international law. However, little has been done to enforce this decision, and the entire group of islands is currently being used to strengthen China's military capabilities without any material obstruction. While China has long denied that it's militarized these islands, instead claiming that defense equipment and soldiers are there simply to maintain freedom of navigation rights. Experts contend that the volume of Chinese military presence on these islands has enabled China to deploy military assets, including combat aircraft and mobile missile launchers at any time. In fact, they contend that China now has the ability to project military might all the way down to northern Australia or into the Indian Ocean by using the islands. Further, Just recently, China has moved away from its previous denial of militarization, instead claiming that military development of the islands is squarely within its right as a sovereign nation. In addition to significantly improving China's military capabilities, these islands enhance China's historical claims to the South China Sea. They give China unrivaled control over a vital international waterway through which most of the world's maritime traffic passes. Trade shipments worth trillions of dollars move across the South China Sea every year. In a time of crisis, control of the sea would offer China a much greater potential to isolate and pressure other world powers. This will be especially dangerous if China ever initiates a full-scale war over Taiwan. Beginning in 2020, China expanded its Coast Guard patrols and military exercises in disputed areas. As harassment of Southeast Asian oil and gas operations by Chinese law enforcement has become the new normal, Beijing subsequently passed legislation bolstering the China Coast Guard's authority to enforce maritime claims, including using force if necessary. In response to increased Chinese activity in the area, the United States has sent numerous battleships and aircraft carriers to advocate freedom of navigation rights in the South China Sea, while strengthening alliances with Japan and Australia. Last year, the United States and Japan conducted an extensive joint military drill in the region. In response to these efforts, China has responded by enlisting the help of what has been called its maritime militia soldiers, also called the People's Armed Forces Maritime Militia, or PAF-MM. Since many Chinese ships continue to engage in large-scale fishing operations while also working alongside military or law enforcement patrols, the distinction between commercial and defense activity by China's military militia is sometimes blurred. Chinese maritime militia soldiers are meant to be able to fish and fight, a phrase from Chinese literature on the subject. This means that a Chinese maritime militiaman may be out there doing his customary fishing, but he is also required to fulfill his patriotic mission on a daily basis. While most activity has been peaceful, militia tactics escalated in 2019 when a Chinese vessel clashed with and sank a wooden Filipino fishing boat stationed northeast of the Spratly Islands. According to Philippine media, the crew was left to drown until being rescued by a neighboring Vietnamese boat. Experts have described China's maritime militia as a prime illustration of its gray zone techniques for asserting sovereignty in areas where other countries have competing claims without engaging in traditional combat. The militia has helped China disregard international treaties, controlling international waterways, and the 2016 landmark ruling that invalidated Beijing's historical claim to the South China Sea under its 9-dash line. China has aggressively expanded into the 9-dash line, leaving many of its neighbors with little alternatives for reclaiming their territory despite the ruling. China's use of gray zone tactics represent a direct and serious challenge to a rules-based system, which sets the conditions for states to interact with one another and iron out differences as sovereign equals. These techniques involve favoring might above right. And while China appears to be showing no signs of pulling back from its expansion in the area, it remains to be seen whether China's aggressive expansion into the South China Sea is cause for concern. Well, that brings us to the end of today's video. Let us know what you think of China's rapid expansion into the South China Sea. We'll see you guys in the next one.